Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Squawk Talk on Socialist Telly. I am on my last night of isolation, having contracted the virus, and celebrating that by part two of a cracking programme from last week, where we talked to the Black Lives Matter Coalition, and I'm delighted again to be joined by most of the people that we had on there last week. So I have Delia Mattis from Black Lives Matter, Adria Watson. Oh no, we haven't got Adria, sorry. Camilla Mungaza from the Free Sianda campaign, Mel Mullings from the RMT Black Members Committee, and Alexandra Ruddock from Black Lives Matter in Portsmouth. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, Steve. Hi, everyone.
Thank you to everybody who's watching us live. If you're watching us catch up, thank you for that as well. And just to point out, we had a brilliant amount of engagement during last week's program and since. So I would encourage you to get involved in the conversation during the program again this week, which you can do by watching the streams on the Squawk Box Facebook page and the Socialist Telly Twitter feed. Sorry, not Socialist Telly YouTube. Sadly, Twitter doesn't at the moment make it possible to field the comments that come in response on the Twitter thread. So let's see if we can pick up more or less where we left off last week, which I think Mel was talking about the situation for RMT members and what's going on the rail in London, etc. So give us a bit of an update on that, please.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Thank goodness the RMT members have received our ballot papers, and we know overwhelmingly we're going to be having an exceptionally positive strike mandate when it comes back in. So a message out to TfL, to come back to the table and speak. Andy Lord, who is the director of London Underground and TfL, sent out letters to employees of London Underground telling us the detriments of striking, which I found was quite hilarious. Because it showed no empathy as to what we're going to be losing. There's two sides of it. Yes, there are business needs where, everyone's got business needs. But the members that are putting our, blood, sweat and tears into keeping the underground continuously going, the years, I do deep tunnel work. So that's 10 years of my life just gone off. I have my pension to look forward to, and to know that's going to be, in question, it's a very, very worrying time for me. I don't want to be doing deep tunneling work until I'm 68 years old for the state pension to kick in and probably, not really sustain me. So these pensions, and this time that we're in is a really serious time. So, yeah, we want to get back to the negotiating table and protect what we have. We don't want to, I think one of the poignant things that we stand for is that when it comes to our pensions, we want to actually leave it in a better condition for people that come in after us than we came into it. It's not just about, I'm all right, Jack, I'm going to retire, everything's going to be okay. Anybody understand how pensions funds work? You have to continuously fund it. If you then scrap it, even our retired members are at risk. So, this is a very important issue that we are facing at the moment, and hopefully we have the public support.
And so, give us some detail on what exactly are they trying to do to the pensions? What's the what are they up to with it?
Yeah, so at the moment we have a good final salary pension. They're trying to scrap that scheme and come into what's called an average earning scheme. So I've had 3 children since I've been on the underground, and there's periods of time when I've worked part-time. So that then would, it would adversely affect people who, especially women, who, have had to go part-time, women who have taken time off for maternity, etc. People who've got caring responsibilities, people with disabilities, people with any form of adverse things that would stop them from working normal, 38-hour weeks or whatever it is that we do, on all the way up to your pension age. And also some people are very fortunate that, that maybe the last 2 years of their working life, the glass ceiling breaks and they're able to get a promotion. You know, it's very difficult to get promotions. You know, if you're black or, you know, of some other you know, ethnicity, and then finally, you know, you get that final salary that could set you up, you know, give you some form of, you know, ease, a little bit of ease, I would say, to help you catch up with all the years that you didn't get that salary. And that's all going to be taken away from us. So it's a very difficult situation. And like I said, it does affect people who've already got their pensions, because that scheme will then get capped off. So whatever they're getting now, you know, you claim your pension at whatever salary you stop working at the time. And then it obviously goes up by inflation. If it stops, then you're no longer going to get that benefit. So there's a lot of, you know, different effects that will snowball if our pension scheme is messed with.
Yes. And I mean, as so often with these things, I mean, every time the government changes the rules as well, they always seem to manage to disadvantage people from ethnic groups, people, you know, women especially, and they usually will take steps to hide their impact reports and stuff. So I mean, what's TfL done? Have they done a proper analysis on what the impact of this is going to be, and if so, have they published it?
We've done a lot of we do quite a lot of work around gender pay gap, race pay gaps. We do a lot of research in that. So all this information has gone with us armed when we have these negotiations with London Underground. And plus you have a committee. They don't just come up with it now. They discuss it with other people, they discuss it with independent people. I know they also look at other schemes as well, that are, you know, introducing other industries, etc. But the point is, you know, you've got a very big groundswell of ethnic communities that work at the bottom of I would say of the food chain, and when it comes to transport industries. So we are the people that are going to be most adversely affected, and because it doesn't affect those people at the top, they don't see it as as an issue that needs to be organized around, or something that needs to be discussed. And it's pretty difficult to get leeway with people that think that they don't, they can have a voluntary severance that could literally, you could buy 2-3 houses with that severance that that package that they're going to get, where we can't.
I was going to say, not only does it affect you currently working, but it's going to make the company less employable. So people aren't going to look to the company if they haven't got a good pension scheme, because people are looking to their future. So the work will be stretched out. You're putting job adverts out and no one's applying. So what you do in your role is going to be stretched and stretched. So
our frameworks are going to be basically what you're going to have. Is in my current role, I don't do rest day working, which is a godsend for me. I don't need to do rest day working. I need those days off to recover, from the fatigue of doing shift work. I've done it for 20 years. Shift work for 20 years is a long time, and then your average working years is about 40 years before you get your full, remit of pension. So my framework being chopped up and being sold. Now I might have to do 2-3 days of overtime, on top of, and then that might be based on seniority. It might be based on this. It might be based on favoritism. It might be based on all kinds of stuff. There's going to be this very hostile environment that's created once our pension scheme is messed with, So it's a really big issue. It's got so many layers that it covers. That, like I said, us ordinary working people we're just gonna be annihilated, in our working life, if it's messed with.
When's all that coming to a head? What's the schedule on the ballot?
So the ballot finishes just after the holidays, and then we'll see what happens. It's for our ammunition to go back to the negotiating table, Steve. I mean, like I said, the thing about it, you've got a treasury, you've got a committee that meets, and they can be called to meet at any time. When you're in dispute, when you actually do things the correct way and say you're in dispute, you can actually go to ACAS and call in these meetings. So hopefully by, the end of January, February, London Underground will, get their head together, come back with the right figures or whatever it is they need to do, and decide that they're not going to, mess with our pensions any longer.
And what's the public's reaction been with it? Because we saw the big upset, quite rightly, the other week where Sadiq Khan, the London mayor, had announced that the union was refusing to come to the table, which was bollocks.
Yes.
And got himself properly told off for that. But how much did that message filter out to people? Are people picking up a negative vibe because of this kind of messaging from City Hall as well as from the employer?
The response from the public has been fantastic. I must say, when you're talking about pensions, everyone that works has got a pension. And even if you don't work, you can look forward to a pension, in some form or another. So pensions is not something that, a lot of industries that, show solidarity aren't familiar with. So it's been a fantastic response, I'll be honest with you. And there's, the UCU disputes for the teachers at Goldsmith. And, I have to mention that they're going through the same type of thing. The fire brigade, they went through the same thing, and they've been fantastic because they've come to some of our meetings and given us some pointers and tips about what they went through. So, the response from the public and response from other industries has been thoroughly very, very positive and, fantastic.
That's good to hear. Thank you for that update. Before we get into a bit more of a free-for-all discussion, I suspect, let's have a little update from Camilla, if that's okay, on what the situation is with your daughter, Ciara. And you were telling me before the program that that's moving on and you're making some preparation. So give us a little update and we'll put the link, if I can find it. Here we are on the bottom of the screen there. So if anybody wants to chip in to the legal fight, etc., then they know how to do so.
Thank you, Steve. Where we are at the moment, we're fundraising really, and we're fundraising in preparation to submit an application to the Supreme Court. I think I briefly mentioned last week that Ciara has had her second appeal, and the appeal application was denied. However, some fundamental things came out of that hearing, and those fundamental things was we proved that Ciara was attacked because the CPS Ciara was not attacked. We proved which one of the 40-year-old white male, stamped on her face, because she had a clear, visible footprint on her face. And also they said that Ciara is a vulnerable person because Ciara is a young Black disabled woman who had walking disabilities and has walking disabilities and was not able to take herself away from the situation due to a major leg reconstructive surgery. So she was in a vulnerable situation when, she was set upon, with a group of 5 people, and 3 of those people attacked her. So we was able to prove a lot of things, which what Ciara has been saying all this time. Ciara's story has never wavered. So we are now, set to prove the rest of it indeed she did not start this attack. This was actually a racial aggravated assault against a young Black woman because of her skin colour. And this is what we're trying to set out to prove now. So we're just doing this fundraising. And for me, really, it's important that, when I, speak at events and things like that, I have to reiterate the deliberate failure of the Dyfed-Powys police force, that chose not to look into both sides. There were 2 allegations made. The police chose the white people against one solitary Black woman who's never been in trouble.
Excuse me interrupting, but do I remember from last week correctly then that, the case against her was essentially supposedly that she charged in and assaulted them, and she's got a disability and can't walk very well. So what?
That's correct. That's correct. Yes. Their story is that Ciara smashed a glass in the face of the woman for no apparent reason. That is the CPS side of the story. However, what happened is that Ciara was attacked by this woman and 2 men which are related to her or friends of her. So there were 2 totally different versions of events. and the Dyfed-Powys Police chose to look at only one. If the two major allegations being made, you've got to look into both sides. So for me, when I am, speaking about Cianda's injustice, I always highlight the deliberate failure of the police, because I provided them with enough information and evidence to go on, and they chose not to hand that evidence to the CPS. So, and there are clear, deliberate flaws in Cianda's case. And Cianda is not the only Black person in prison for a crime she didn't commit. And that needs to be highlighted as well. And it's, and a lot of people, we mentioned about the Met Police. Yes, they are institutionally racist, but every single police force in the country is institutionally racist, and every single police force in the country have committed atrocities against Black people, against brown people, and there are many people in prison in the UK for crimes that didn't commit. So for me, really, it's kind of highlighting that failure. And once we overturn Cianda's conviction, Dyfed-Powys Police better watch out, because they've messed with the wrong parents, and I need to pull them up on that. And heads need to roll. And when it comes to other families that have suffered certain injustices, we need to help them bring the police to account, because it's about bringing the police to account. They have too much power. It takes years to bring police to justice. That what they call rotten apples. No, they're part of a rotten system that is designed to make people like us, Black families, people with brown skin, suffer. That's what they're designed for. And, this is why we've got this coalition as well, because we need to highlight these atrocities and we need to bring this system down. I don't care how many years or decades it takes, because there's Black families, brown families that have been fighting for justice for their children and families for decades. It has to stop. Because the police need to answer for their failures, just like we need to answer for our failures at work, just like we need to answer for our failures in everyday life and let people down. Police need to answer for their failures when they let the people that they are supposed to serve down. Like I was briefly mentioning last week about the Dalian Atkinson case, the professional footballer that was murdered by the policeman. It took 5 years to bring him to justice. Why did it take 5 years to bring him to justice? Only for him to be convicted of only manslaughter and serve 8 years. Yes, it was a breakthrough for a Black family to actually bring a police officer to justice after how many years? 30 odd years. But to only get manslaughter, and it takes them 5 years to bring that police officer to justice. This should not be going on in 2021. It really shouldn't. So for me, really, it's about, making sure I highlight the failures of the police force that did what they did to Cianda, highlight the failures of what the South Wales police have done to Mohammed when they killed him, and also highlight the failures that Gwent police have done to Moeed when they killed him, in earlier on this year. So, and to recognise and for people to, to help, for me to help them recognise that every police force is the same and they all need to be brought into account, because they need to answer to us, not us to them.
Agreed.
And I just want to add.
Sorry, Delia, let me just point out along the bottom of the screen there is the CrowdJustice crowdfunder, which is running there to contribute towards that campaign. So I'll leave that running on the bottom, and if anybody wants to chip in, then do get yourselves over there and support that case. Sorry, Delia, go on.
No, I was just going to add that, and I think the police every so often throw us a bone. And I think they do it to confuse the public and make the public think that actually we're getting some kind of justice. But you can't even imagine for a minute that the case of Dalian Atkinson is justice. But number one, he was found guilty of manslaughter. And number two, how many Black people have died at the hands of the police and nothing happens? It's not justice. It's like, I don't know, it's like a red herring. Because if you look at the police's record, and it's frightening, and people should be alarmed. And I mentioned last week, it's not just Black people, it's women as well. Now, the amount of sexual misconduct complaints for one organisation people should be alarmed. I mean, I cannot get over the numbers. I've quoted 750, but I'm sure it's a lot more than that. And hardly any of them get sacked. Who is
That was per
policing
year, wasn't
the
it?
police?
Was that 750 a year? Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, who is policing the police? No one. They're policing themselves, because the IOPC is a sham organisation that does nothing, just sits there and turns up at the scene of something happening and then says they're investigating, and then nothing happens. You know, in the case of what went on in Wales, the IOPC released a statement before there was even any investigation and said there's no case to answer.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? What are you doing speaking on behalf of the police? They can speak for themselves. So the idea that the police, you know, when people criticize Black Lives Matter because we have so much criticism of the police, but look at their records. I mean, if you go back this year alone, there's paedophilia, there's robbery, there's drug dealing, there's rape, there's murder. The whole thing. Listen, and they talk about organized crime, which is just bullshit. It's just state propaganda bullshit. Right, organized crime and gang crime. It's just nonsense, because the biggest organized crime organization in the UK is the police force. And I feel like the numbers qualify that. You know what I mean? So we have every right to be afraid, and we have every right to raise the issues. And at this point, we're not going to stop.
Good. Anybody else want to come in on that before we go on to the next bit?
I was just going to add on to what, carry on. Sorry, carry on.
No. I was just going to say, similar when we talk about the IOPC, in the case of Mahmoud, they came in charging, all guns blazing, claiming things that hadn't even happened before it was even referred to them. So, like Delia and like Camilla had already said, the IOPC is an absolute sham,
And the reason why it's a sham is because 40% of the IOPC are ex-police officers. If you're going to have ex-police officers policing, well, so-called policing the police, well, it's not policing the police, is it? It's an absolute shambles and failure and mockery. And this is why we have these continued problems, and it takes decades for families of injustices to get justice. You know, ex-police force, monitoring the police. And they don't act until the police standards department say they want to hand over a case to them. And a lot of people don't know that. The IOPC don't demand it. They only act on the chief officer's request from the police standards department. It's actually sickening, the process that they follow. It's absolutely sickening. But that's me. They're done about that.
So the police get to decide when somebody gets called in to actually investigate them.
Yeah. Yeah, because the IOPC has no power. I mean, if you speak to like senior people in the IOPC, they will say people have left because of that same reason. They have no power whatsoever. I don't even know what the purpose is, to be honest with you. I'm not quite sure.
Well, it sounds like it's similar to any other kind of self-regulating thing, really, where it's put there to give an illusion of accountability. Similar in the press, there's one independent regulator which we subscribe to, and there's one which is run by the other publications by themselves and for themselves, and almost never gives a judgment. I mean, I don't think in however many years it is they've existed now, they've ever launched an actual, one of the investigation that they have a statutory power to do into one of the publications, and some of them have got lists of lies that they've told about people as long as your arm, and they still don't do anything about it. So I suspect it's to give people the illusion that something's happening and there's some level of control and accountability in the whole thing, just as a diversionary tactic, really.
Yeah.
So police bills, I mean, we've seen the policing and the immigration bills, etc. We've seen a lot of all the press attention pretty much go on to Boris Johnson and his parties now, his shindigs, and other conservative shindigs. Rumours today that these the people who took the picture of him on his terrace with his wine glass and all the rest of it from last summer was was just next door in Downing Street. because of the angle of the photo. I don't know whether that's whether there's anywhere else it could have been taken from. Those things all serve very handily as a distraction, really, I think, from, you know, and the Tories will be beavering away behind the scenes, still pushing through all their other racist legislation and everything that's going on at the minute. So give us an update what's going on with all that, please.
Well, it's angering. It's angering because of the amount of people who were stopped and fined during lockdown, the amount of people that were stopped and fined, the amount of harassment that took place last year from the police, being stopped on the street, going about their business. You know, there was a video circulated of 3 friends in Ponders End, 2 black, 1 white, and obviously the police harassed the 2 black boys, humiliate them, and the white boys left alone. And the reason why and this is just standard, by the way, the reason why they were harassing them was based on COVID laws. That was their carte blanche to go and harass black people in the street. And so I know people are making light of what Boris Johnson did, but it really is a goddamn disgrace. Our communities were put under such pressure. You know, it was so difficult. Mental health is already affecting our communities disproportionately. It's already affecting our youth disproportionately, and then lockdown on top of it, and then the police on top of that. And here you've got this guy who's supposed to be a primate. I could swear my head. I'm controlling myself from swearing at the moment.
Don't feel you have to. But
so what was that say?
I said, don't feel you have to. You know, by all means, let me.
Good.
Yeah, I mean, well, we've got this comment in here from Kerno Demo saying, how can we trust the police when we watch them cast Johnson a blind eye, yet prosecute a house party in Ilford or pin down a picnicker in Hyde Park for doing the same thing? So we had that
100%.
Really, you know, you often, and I'll swear, but you often get the feeling as though they're just taking the piss because they just think they can get away with anything.
Yeah.
But we've had the Metropolitan Police deciding that, you know, they're not going to investigate the Tories over these parties because they've got no evidence. Well, they were manning the frigging door and had a list of all the guests. I mean, how much more evidence, at least as a starting point for an investigation, do you need? And that, you know, and yet they sit there with a straight face and tell us that there's they've got no evidence and they can't pursue it.
Cressida Dick is doing her job protecting the government.
Absolutely.
That's her job, and that's why she's still in the job. She's a failed police commissioner. Everything that she's trying to implement has failed from the minute she's been in office, and she's still there because she can do the bidding for the Tory government. And he needs to go, and she needs to go, and all the 2 of them need to go. Because
there's plenty more that need to go.
Yeah.
Go on then, tell us.
Pretty Patel is one of them. But anyway, this information doesn't surprise me at all. It seems like, you know, I think it's kind of funny that December 2021, we're now seeing pictures from June 2020. Someone's had hold of those pictures and they're purposely coming out at this time. I don't know what they're trying to do. But if it's taken this long to get people to wake up, then I don't know what humanity is at this point. Boris Johnson has been a waste man since the day, and he needs to go. Boris needs to go. And if this is not enough for people to sit and think people lost loved ones, people struggled. I know communities in Portsmouth that had 3 jobs through COVID and physically couldn't take time off even one of their jobs. So all of this self-isolating, if your child had COVID, they had to stay home. They were fighting tooth and nail to be in work, and Boris is there sat on his little terrace drinking wine and eating cheese, taking the piss, saying it's a meeting. I'm sorry, but no meetings were allowed like that. So I just think at this point people need to wake up and see what this guy is actually calling running the country, because it's not.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And it's around that time as well that boy, I think he was from an Asian family, died on his own in hospital. He was only, I can't forget the exact age, but like 13 or something. And died in his own hospital from COVID because the restrictions at the time were, you know, forbade his family from sitting with him in the hospital as he died.
Yeah.
And there's Boris Johnson and his ilk sitting around on their lardy houses and, you know, sipping the wine, drinking the whiskey, having a laugh, making a joke about 2 inches of, you know, social distancing and all this kind of crap. While, you know, people's loved ones were dying on their own. I mean, this is not you know, it might seem to be a bit of a comedic thing to some people now, you know, and it isn't.
Where was the media though? Where was the media? Because Steve, you know Parliament. Parliament, take it from somebody who's worked there. Parliament is crawling with media. They're everywhere. There's hardly a place where they're not allowed to be. They are absolutely everywhere. So they've sat on this for how many months?
Yeah.
Well, the interesting thing, I think, as well, if you notice the picture that ITV put out, the still from the video from this press conference of the audience that was at this thing, not a press conference, but a mock one for them to practice giving their excuses for this thing. And the faces of several people were grayed, you know, blurred out, so you couldn't tell who they were.
I saw that. Yeah.
Who were those folk? You know, and there are lots of people speculating that they were establishment journalists who were there helping out with this mock press conference to make sure it was realistic. So they sat, you know, if this is true, they sat on it and knew full well what was going on. And you know, and then the ITV, when they published the picture, helpfully blur their faces out to avoid putting them into a difficult position. And
I think it's interesting how the first two people to openly give resignations firstly it was a woman, and then secondly is a black man. You know, and I saw Matt Hancock on TV the other day, and I thought, you know, it's a cheek how he has resigned. He resigned. He didn't get sacked or whatever it was, and now he's on TV, still going on TV, giving his opinions. I don't think you're going to see the lady that resigned, or you know who it is, Sean Bailey. You know who I'm talking about. They're not going to be on TV in the next couple of months giving their opinions, are they? So, you know, all these people that are going to vote, you know, for the Conservatives and doing all of this, you know, please, you know, open your eyes. You know, the type of people that are there, you know, going around in their boys and girls club doing what they're doing. And like you said, the picture has been released. Why are these heads not rolling?
I mean, I think you know, your audience are very switched on. I mean, like the one saying their billionaire press wouldn't be partial, would they? No, of course not. They're there to prop up the government. They're there to prop up the scandal, and they will only let loose and put their toe out of line if it benefits then the press in all sorts of, you know, attention and newspaper selling and things like that. So, you know, this system, you know, that we live in, it's just institutionally racist. It's institutionally classist, if that's a word, and it's about breaking people like us down and propping those people in government that was, you know, that have never really worked a hard day's work in their life, you know, to stay where they are. And, you know, and I don't think people now are blind to it. It's really, I suppose, discovering where the deceit is truly coming from. And I think that is all being revealed. And, you know, I think that it has been revealed what they've been doing, you know, throughout COVID for a reason. You know, people are waking up. However, we have to realise that the country is still very divided. All Boris Johnson has to do is say a few choice words, that people are gonna, you know, so the half of the country are gonna respond to, and that's the issue. And this is why we need to keep fighting. We need to keep fighting this because it's all part of their bigger plan. This is why, as Paul was mentioning, you know, the police were founded to protect the establishment. We need to be breaking down these walls in order to, you know, to burst this wide open. Definitely.
Well, I think the one thing you can guarantee from that is whoever released these, you know, whether it's one person or several, whoever released this information about these parties and the pictures of Boris Johnson, these terrorists and all the rest of it, they weren't doing it out of any sense of altruism or principle, because they're part of the same sack of rats that's, you know, that is up to their neck in all this stuff. They will be doing it for some agenda and ulterior motive, whether that's to prepare a leadership bid, whether that is to, you know, settle scores with somebody that's offended them or something, you know, whatever it is. But, you know, I mean, the thing that stops me getting quite as kind of engaged or sort of, you know, not, oh no, I am very angry, but, you know, it's almost like, well, yeah, they'll get rid of Boris Johnson, but whoever replaces him is going to be as bad and worse.
Just as bad.
And even if it leads to an electoral defeat for them, sadly at the moment, you know, if what passes for the Labour Party at the moment got in, it wouldn't change anything, because it's just, you know, just change the rosette. It's not a real change of personnel in any meaningful sense.
Absolutely.
So, you know,
that's if you believe that the Rosette could win. I mean, at this point.
Well, I
think
don't think they
impossible.
can. But you know, even if they did, it would. You know, it's I couldn't get excited at the moment about the prospect of the Labour government, because I think that the Labour government has been the Labour Party has been taken over by people who are of an ideological ilk with the people that they're supposedly trying to oppose, and you see precious little evidence that they're actually doing it. So, I mean, that's the sad situation in the politics at the minute, and I think we have to be raising awareness about the what they're doing while all this is going on, because it's a handy excuse for them to do a bit of tub thumping and maybe a change of personnel in Downing Street, and be replaced by some equal horror. Priti Patel or whoever, for God's sake,
Jesus Christ, can you imagine? Because that one is, in my opinion, a total goddamn lunatic. That one wants to bring back hanging.
Yes, and I mean, let's not forget
absolutely batshit, allegedly.
She's been up to her neck in a bullying scandal, and before that, she was sacked by Theresa May, I think it was, after having.
I've been blocked by her
off the book meetings with the foreign government and stuff. And this is gonna, so you've got to wonder what state the country's in when this is the lineup who are coming.
Well, she's all wrong because she's blocked me on social media.
So let's set that circus aside for 1 minute and talk about these bills, because those things are still proceeding through while they're distracting, they're jangling the keys over here about Boris Johnson and his parties, but they're at the same time then they're pushing through all this, deeply racist and essentially fascist legislation.
Very disturbing. Very disturbing.
Yeah, so what's the latest with that?
Well, the latest is that in the new year, as we mentioned last year, we're going to be working with People's Assembly and others in the new year. These bills are just so inhumane and so regressive that the only thing we can do, and that's why we're not really focused on party politics, because there's nothing in Parliament for us. There's nothing there that represents us. As far as we're concerned, our voice has to be raised in the streets. You've got to mobilise people to march against this government and campaign against what they're doing and raise the alarm and raise awareness.
Just in case there's anybody watching who isn't abreast of what's what those bills are, give us a quick rundown as to what the impact. There's two, isn't there? What are they notionally aiming to do, and what's the real impact going to be?
Well, the police bill is, and given what we've just been saying about the police and how our communities are affected by them, the police bill gives the police more powers. Can you imagine? I mean, I don't know what that would look like for my community, because Black people are 10 times more likely to be stopped and searched than anybody else. They've killed Black people and nothing happens to them. I mean, I don't know what they want more powers to do. Well, I mean, it's a frightening thought. And whilst I'm talking about Black communities, let me also mention what it does to the GRT communities as well, because it actually criminalizes their way of life. And one thing, we've been on social media talking about our BLM coalition. One of the first groups to respond in solidarity was Drive to Survive, which is a GRT campaigning group. Sherry, hi Sherry, if you're watching, reached out and said they're 100% with us, because we're 100% with them, criminalizing their way of life. And when I listen to people from like Luke, who's from GRT Socialists, he talks about when they arrest the parents who live sometimes in secluded places, what happens to the children, so the children get put into care. And he always talks about that. We have to think about, if this bill is going to criminalize a way of life for a people, how racist is this? Racism is at the heart of this bill, and it's deliberate. I don't know why the British government has taken a set, and always has taken a set on the Gypsy, Roma and Traveller community. But what they are doing, criminalizing the way they live, it can get no worse than that, in my opinion. So,
well, I don't know if you, some people might think, oh, well, they wouldn't abuse it like that, would they, or whatever? Yeah, well, I don't think they even have to abuse it. It's just built into the legislation. But in case anybody forgot, not very long ago, it was 2018. Douglas Ross, one of the top Tories, he was asked what, if he could do anything, this was a question somebody put to him, if there's anything you could do in government that, you could just snap your fingers and make it happen, what would you do? And he didn't say reduce poverty, he didn't say help the NHS, and say that. He said, he'd like to stop gypsies from camping where his constituents don't like it. And, there was incredulity from, I think he apologised subsequently for whatever that's worth. But, there is this inherent, one GRT, he called it the last acceptable racism because, people seem to think it's okay to discriminate against gypsies.
It's been normalised. It's been normalised in this country. And they've been going through this for a long time. Sorry, Alex.
No, I was just going to say, can you imagine of anything that you could change, all of the problems that are in the world, Gypsy, Roma, traveller communities are the biggest issue? Come on, give it a rest. Let people live the way that they live. They've been living like this for hundreds of years. That's their choice. They're not imposing on anyone else. It's honestly, this makes me so angry. I'm just going to stay quiet now because I'm just going to get so annoyed.
Oh no, don't.
Don't stay quiet. And the other thing is that our rights to protest is being threatened. I think they've come out with some sentences for doing certain things like marching in the streets, and we have to ask permission from the state to protest against the state. I mean, what's the likelihood in the first place they're going to say yes? And then if they do, they're going to measure the volume of our protests, and then they're going to tell us if it's too loud. I mean, can you imagine?
I mean, these bills go even deeper, though. If you look into, I've been researching into these bills even deeper, and it goes as far as to say they can stop activists from communicating with each other. So for example, us four, whether we're friends, because we're activists, we would not be able to communicate with each other. That would be enough for them to.
And traveling. What do they call it? Some kind of some kind of terrorism.
Yeah.
Aggravated terror. Some kind of terrorist charge for traveling to take action in another place. So listen,
the standard that they're setting on this is annoyance as well. So it's not, just annoying somebody by being there. And I mean, you'd almost ask, well, if it's not annoying somebody, what's the point of a protest?
Well, there we go.
My question on the thing as well is, that there's no need for this stuff. Because we've just seen this case this week, and I mean, it seemed an excessive punishment for a situation in which nobody died. But this lad who, I think he set fire to a police car or something, and he got 14 years this week. Well,
wow.
But now they want to put a 10-year sentence in for merely causing annoyance. Now, if you've already got the option to bang somebody up for 14 years, nobody died or got injured in the process of his kind of protest that he said he got so mad about the idea that they were going to take away our civil freedom.
But the police officer who killed Dalian Atkinson only got 8 years. Sorry.
But that's it. So you've got this, kind of gross imbalance built in already. But if they want to belong to this kind of hang and flog 'em brigade or whatever that pleases these right-wing strange people, they've already got laws that can do it where they can make a case that it's merited. Why do they need one that's going to, there's no legal valid reason that they need a new law that allows them to penalise people just for creating a nuisance. That's just because
nobody asked for it.
And a free speech, don't they?
They're threatened by BLM. That's the problem. They're threatened by BLM because the movement they never expected.
Yeah, exactly.
So they will do everything they can to get rid of us, and the same with XR.
Exactly. I think, they pointed out two organisations, and, let's not forget, I think, was it that Priti Patel put in an extra 13 pages into the bill?
Right.
After it was already left,
13 extra pages.
Yeah. So after it already left the Commons, and went to the Lords. So an extra 13 pages. And Mel, I think it was you that mentioned about, from a certain high-ranking police officer, if they say you have done a crime which to do with protesting, they're going to take that police officer as gospel, what he says. Yeah. And I think that's disgusting. And this is what we mean, that what they've been given more power. Look what they're doing already. But yet from a high-ranking officer say so, an institutionally racist organization, they're going to give that power in, and then to say, okay, this person did this, and you will automatically get, what is it, 52 weeks in prison, depending what it is protesting. And obviously, like you said, Steve, you know, someone got 14 years. You know, the people are missing the point of the independent reporters and what they filmed at that protest in Bristol, and how the police goaded the crowd, which was actually peaceful, goaded the crowd and actually goaded them to turn violent. And so a lot of those protesters were actually protecting themselves from the police. Now, this is what part of this bill is about, is to whitewash all of that nonsense and give the police ultimate power in order to trample on this movement, to trample on any type of human rights movement. You know, this country is really trying to get the stranglehold on us, but we're not going to let them do it. We will still protest on the streets. We will speak these truths. We will tell the truths that the media and other people will not tell, and we will expose them. And it is because that they are scared while they're doing it in this underhanded way. It's not the first time that they've done that. They do it throughout government, throughout whoever is in government. There's always underhandedness. But this here is very, very sinister, and we must expose it.
The idea that they will take a police officer at his word on something like that as well is mind-boggling, because what was it we saw with the protests during the summer, you know, with the, you know, so many, you know, 30 police officers had been hospitalized or something, you know, and when they got into the details of it, it was a couple, and one of them had got a bit of heat stroke because he had too much gear on, and the other one had trapped his finger in the police door and had to go and get a stitch in his finger or something. It wasn't anything to do with the protesters, but that was repeated and regurgitated by the media across the board,
and
claiming that this protest had turned violent because of it. Sorry, say that?
Didn't they put out a story that one of the police broke their arm and it turned out to be completely fake?
Yes, I think there was two separate incidents actually at different protests, where one they claimed there'd been an array of police officers injured in the course of the protest, is what they said. But what had actually happened, it was kind of, you know, as I say, trapping the finger in their own car door and things like that when they were getting out of a car. And they were trying to put that down. And they had to admit it in the end. In the end, they had to admit it, but not before it had gone the rounds of all the media with all this, you know, reporting that the protest had been violent, you know.
I mean,
if anyone was to ever do a documentary, I'm not going to take too much time, documentary or some form of, you know, editorial in regards to the real, what that happens in the police force, etc. Do you think there would be anything positive that would come out? There'd be nothing positive that comes out.
No, they already did a show. They already did a Panorama, and they focused on 3 of the black people that have died at the hands of the police. And one of them that stuck out was a guy who was suffering from a mental health episode. The guy was, I think he was 6'3".
Is that Christopher Capassa?
No, I can't remember this guy's name, but they showed you footage. Basically, he'd left somewhere and they called the police. The police went and checked on him. This guy was in a manic episode. He was eating like what are these yogurts? One of these onkin yogurts, like just on the street. The police went up to him like, "Is everything okay?" And he was just like, "Yeah, I'm chilling. I'm just chilling." That's literally, he didn't say anything else. They've got cam footage of him. So they left him, came back, and he was like on the floor in some, not park, but like an allotment on the floor. So the police went over to him. They tried dragging him. He literally lifted his arm out to touch the police. The hand literally touched the police officer. She was like, "Ow, you're going to break my hand." In her statement, she said that her hand hurt so much she couldn't move her arm. But in the video, you see her like doing all of this. This is, your hand hurts so much that you felt you'd break it, but you're there, move it. So to take a police officer's word for gospel is so dangerous to the communities. So dangerous, because what they say in whatever they're calling the heat of the moment, because the video evidence showed you completely, the man didn't even touch her hand. If he'd have grabbed it and not let go, fair enough. But the minute she said let go, he literally just was like, so dangerous.
And Cressida needs to fix up her force, because if we're getting video evidence, and remember, not all the video evidence is there, but at least when it is there, you need to be taking making these officers accountable and giving them the harshest punishment you can, so that people that would think of not of not being accountable when there isn't a camera available to protect the people in our communities is there. I think it's really, really, you talk about it being dangerous. Like I said, in my community, all our youth that gets roughed up all the time, in Croydon, it's crazy. And then when the language comes out, when you go on the Zooms with the police commissioner, in our area, and listen to the way they speak, there's no empathy there. There's no understanding about police in the community, having a good relationship with your people in your community, understanding why the situation is what it is, so then you can put in the correct means to prevent things from happening, in a meaningful way, not just roughing up people, shoving them in the back of the van and then hauling them into jail. I mean, what does that do?
Well, I haven't even got a chance to see some of the comments, because I'm looking at a small screen. I saw some comments. I know one of them I agreed with. Has anybody been watching the comments?
Which one was it?
Yeah, no, I see them when they come up.
Oh, there was something from Paul.
There's been a couple in from Paul. Earlier on, he was talking about the police being founded to protect the establishment.
We agree.
And then he was asking a question about what the alignment is between the BLM coalition and BLM in the US, because he wasn't happy with the way that they've aligned themselves with.
Good question. Thanks, Paul. It's a good question.
He wasn't happy with the way that they've aligned themselves with what he calls the racist Joe Biden. So
I don't think I'm going to get into that, because at the end of the day, I think, but it's not just BLM as an organization. You're talking about BLM, like communities of people that came out and voted for Biden, and it was the black vote that got him over the line. They live there. They know why they did that. At the end of the day, there was a choice. I mean, they didn't have a good choice, did they? They had Biden or they had Trump. Could black people in America, knowing that they've got the power of the vote, that we haven't realized yet in this country, by the way, but knowing they've got the power in their votes, could they allow someone like Trump to stay in power? Which would you choose? What they did is they chose collectively, and they chose to vote for Joe Biden. He's not a socialist. He's not going to distribute the wealth, but he's not a raving lunatic white supremacist who has his white supremacist base that were taking over America. So there's a big difference. So I am completely sympathetic to what they did in America, absolutely. And I'd have done the same thing. Not that Joe Biden's anything special. Let's get to the BLM question. Are we aligned with the USA BLM, the organization that was founded? But no, we're not. We are BLM in as much as Black Lives Matter in the UK, and we are what we say on the tin. We're campaigning for our communities, for the issues that affect our communities here. We do international solidarity, but we're not aligned with any organization. We're just us. We are the organization, and that's basically it. But it's a good question, because a lot of people will be asking that in private and not letting us know.
Well,
Yes.
Right, we've got 5 minutes left. As last week, we haven't struggled at all to fill the time. Is there anything that you want to get in the last 5 minutes? Because it's Christmas. It's Christmas next weekend, so I don't think we'll be coming back to part 3.
I hope everybody has a great Christmas. But after Christmas, okay, you can have your New Year, and then after the New Year, we've got to mobilize people. We've got to protect our human rights. We have to mobilize like never before. So have your break. I'm having mine. We're all having ours. But then in the new year, we've got to show this government, this racist, fascist government, that we mean business. So that's my message. Happy Christmas, everybody.
Happy Christmas. Well, I think we'll wind it up on that note then, and actually get a couple of minutes early finish for people. But I would like to echo that if you know, whatever your situation is this Christmas, and there's a lot of people in terrible hardship. I hope that you manage to have a good time with your family. I hope that you recharge your batteries, because it's going to be a tough year, and it's going to need everybody of goodwill to be pulling in the same direction together. And you know, I do appreciate you watching the program. I do appreciate those who are sharing it as well. Going to be lots to do. I am very confident we'll have the comrades here back on the program again in the new year to give everybody a kick up the backside and get us all energized.
And if there's anybody extremely struggling, please be extremely struggling. Don't take the piss and take up. But if you desperately need something, can you direct messages on BLM Coalition, and we'll see what we can do.
Fantastic
Definitely.
offer. So, and I'll just give one last point there to the link that's been going along through the program, the CrowdJustice page there for the Free Ciara campaign. That's going to need to come to a head in next in 2022 as well. So, if you can support that, then please do. So, thank you ever so much, everybody. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your support this year as well for Socialist Telly and for Squawk Box.
Thank you for your support, Steve. You've been absolutely amazing with us.
Thanks, Steve.
Pleasure always. So solidarity, everybody.
Thank you.
I will see you
Merry
again
Christmas.
in 2022.
Bye, everyone. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Take care, everybody.